There is a small, almost forgettable detail buried in the after-action reports of the German 2nd SS Panzer Division from the summer of 1944. A staff officer writing in clipped military prose refers to their American opponents not by their official designation but by a nickname, one that had already spread through German field communications with remarkable speed. He calls them Roosevelt's SS. He does not explain the term. He does not need to. By that point, every German soldier who had fought in Normandy knew exactly what it meant. The 30th Infantry Division arrived in France in June 1944 as part of the massive Allied build-up following D-Day. On paper, they were one of dozens of American divisions flooding into the theatre. In practice, within weeks of sustained combat, they had become something else entirely, a formation that German commanders began to track with a particular, almost personal intensity. The story of why that happened is not a simple tale of battlefield heroism. It is something stranger and more human, a story about fear, frustration, humiliation, and the slow psychological unraveling that comes when a professional military force repeatedly cannot do what it believes it should be able to do. To understand the German reaction, you have to start with what the Wehrmacht expected from American troops in 1944. The prevailing assessment among German officers, shaped by early encounters in North Africa and Italy, was that American soldiers were brave enough individually but poorly led, tactically rigid, and dependent on material superiority to compensate for operational weakness. The Germans had a phrase for it: Materialschlacht, a battle of materials rather than maneuver. The Americans, in this view, won by weight, not skill. This belief was not pure arrogance. It had some empirical basis, and it made the 30th Division's performance in Normandy deeply, personally offensive to the officers who encountered them. The division, nicknamed Old Hickory after Andrew Jackson, was a National Guard unit from the Carolinas, Tennessee, and Georgia. It had trained for years before deployment and arrived with a reputation as a solid, unspectacular formation. What it demonstrated in the bocage country of Normandy was something that defied the German mental model entirely. The hedgerow terrain of northern France, dense earthen walls topped with thick vegetation, dividing the landscape into a maze of small fields, had neutralized American armor and firepower advantages almost completely. It was precisely the kind of environment where German tactical doctrine built on small unit initiative and aggressive counterattack should have dominated. For a while, it did. Then the 30th arrived. The fighting around St. Lo in July 1944 provides the first major data point. The 30th Division was tasked with holding the northern shoulder of the planned American breakout, Operation Cobra. What happened on July 25, 1944, is one of the more extraordinary and quietly horrifying episodes in American military history. The Army Air Forces, attempting to carpet-bomb German positions ahead of the offensive, dropped short, twice, on 2 consecutive days. American bombs killed 111 American soldiers and wounded nearly 500 more, including the death of Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, the highest-ranking American officer killed in the European theater. The 30th Division absorbed a catastrophic proportion of these casualties. A soldier in the division, Sergeant Vern Swanson, wrote in his personal diary on July 26th, "Yesterday they hit us again, our own planes. The men are not talking much. Some of them are just sitting. I don't know what to say to them." The remarkable thing is not that this happened. The remarkable thing is what the 30th Division did next. Within 24 hours of the second bombing, the division reorganized, absorbed replacements, and attacked. They did not pause for days of consolidation. They moved forward into the chaos, into ground that was simultaneously disrupted by the bombing and still held by German defenders who had survived it. German signals intelligence, intercepted and translated by Wehrmacht headquarters, recorded American radio traffic showing the 30th reforming with what one German analyst noted was implausible speed. It was during the exploitation phase of Cobra, in late July and early August, that the nickname Roosevelt's SS crystallized. The term is illuminating precisely because of what it reveals about the German psychological state. the SS formations, the Leibstandarte, das Reich, the Hitlerjugend, were the Wehrmachtselite, defined by fanatical commitment and refusal to yield ground regardless of tactical logic. To compare American National Guardsmen from the American South to these formations was not coming from German officers intended as a compliment in the conventional sense. It was an expression of baffled exasperation. These Americans were not supposed to fight like this. The specific flashpoint was Mortain. In early August 1944, Hitler ordered Operation Lüttich, a massive armoured counterattack through Mortain designed to cut off the advancing American forces and reach the coast at Avranches, potentially trapping Patton's Third Army and reversing the entire Allied position in France. The attack involved 7 Panzer divisions, including SS armoured formations, with significant Tiger and Panther tank concentrations. It was the largest German armoured offensive in the West since the initial 1940 campaign. The unit standing directly in its path, holding the high ground at Hill 317 east of Mortain, was the 30th Infantry Division. Here is where that small detail from the beginning of this story becomes important again. Those after-action reports that referred to Roosevelt's SS, the ones that seemed like bureaucratic notation, had been quietly circulating through German command structures for weeks before Mortain. Senior German planners had read them, and yet, when planning Operation Lüttich, the German command assessed that the 30th Division could be bypassed or overwhelmed in the initial armoured surge. They were wrong in a way that became catastrophic. The 2nd Battalion of the 120th Infantry Regiment, roughly 700 men, found themselves cut off on Hill 317 as the German armour swept around their position. They stayed there for 6 days. They called in artillery fire on their own perimeter when German infantry pressed close enough to make it necessary. They directed airstrikes from their hilltop position that helped shred the German armoured columns below. A forward observer, Lieutenant Robert Weiss, kept a log during those days that was later preserved by the National Archives. One entry reads, August 9th, ammo low, water lower. Germans tried the north slope again after dark. We held. Directed fires on column at grid 447. Confirmed kills uncertain but fires visible for miles. The battalion, when finally relieved, had suffered over 300 casualties but had not surrendered the hill. The German attack had failed in large part because of that refusal. The German divisional commander who led the initial assault through Mortain, SS Gruppenführer Wilhelm Bittrich, reportedly stated in a post-battle debrief that the American resistance on Hill 317 had been not in keeping with what we had come to expect. This is, filtered through military understatement, a remarkable sentence. Bittrich was one of the most experienced armoured commanders in the German military. He had fought from Poland to the Eastern Front to Normandy. And here he was, noting that Americans had done something outside his experiential framework. What made the German frustration run so deep was not simply that they lost at Mortain. Armies lose battles. What bothered German officers at every level, and this is documented in captured diaries, interrogation reports, and post-war testimony, was the specific texture of fighting the 30th. The division had a habit of counterattacking almost immediately after absorbing German blows, before German units had consolidated their gains. A captured German infantry lieutenant, identified in American interrogation records only as Lieutenant H, 2nd Panzer Division, told his American interrogators in August 1944, "Your division attacks when it has just been attacked. This is not logical. You should wait. You do not wait." He seemed genuinely puzzled. The 30th also developed a reputation for aggressive night operations, which the Germans found particularly unsettling. German tactical doctrine generally discouraged large-scale night attacks due to coordination difficulties. The 30th used darkness as a tool with increasing frequency through the summer campaign, hitting positions that German units considered secure until dawn. A diary recovered from a German soldier killed near Weiher in August contains the entry, "Third night in a row they have come after dark. We cannot sleep. The men are tired in a way that rest does not fix. That tiredness, not physical exhaustion but the psychological weight of an enemy who did not behave according to the expected pattern, is perhaps the clearest articulation of why German soldiers hated this particular division. The campaign continued through Belgium and into Germany itself. At Aachen in October 1944, the 30th Division participated in the first battle fought on German soil, taking part in the encirclement and eventual surrender of the city. German defenders who had been told they were fighting to protect the sacred German homeland found themselves outmaneuvered by a division that had, by this point, accumulated more sustained combat experience than almost any other American formation in the theatre. By the time of the Ardennes offensive in December, when German planners identified which American units they most needed to neutralize quickly, the 30th Division was on the list. The division held at Stavelot and Malmedy, helping to block the northern shoulder of the German advance in a near repetition of the Mortain pattern, absorbing the blow, holding the ground, counterattacking. By the end of the war, the 30th Infantry Division had suffered approximately 18,000 casualties, among the highest of any American division in the European theatre, and had been awarded more unit citations than virtually any comparable formation. The casualty figure matters because it undermines any simple narrative of the division as invincible. They bled. They lost men constantly. What they did not do in engagement after engagement was break. And it was that specific quality, the refusal to behave as the German tactical system predicted, that earned them their German nickname and, beneath the contempt implied in the comparison, a grudging, infuriated respect. The last word might belong to a German regimental commander whose post-war memoir, written in the early 1950s and translated for American military historians, contains a brief passage about his division's encounters with Old Hickory. He writes that fighting the 30th was like arguing with a man who does not hear you. He means it as a criticism. Reading it now, knowing what those men on Hill 317 endured, knowing what Sergeant Swanson wrote in his diary the morning after his own Air Force bombed him, it reads like something closer to a eulogy.